Okay, excellent. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us today. Some housekeeping. Um, be sure to post any questions that you have as we're going through this conversation today in the chat. The session is being recorded, so each of you will be able to access this at a later date. Our goal for the session is very simple. It's to introduce you to two Squired mentors and to answer some pressing questions that you have about the college application, and particularly how to tell your own story. I want to thank you, I say a big thank you to Squired for hosting this discussion on a topic that is top of mind for so many rising seniors, as well as to younger students preparing for college. Squired is a tool that connects you with mentors at more than 40 institutions who advise you on the college essay, school and program selection, and interview preparation, among other elements of your application. To learn more about Squired, as well as to learn more about participating mentors, be sure to visit squired.co. And I know that Martin and Alex are going to put that link in the chat. Now, today, we have the pleasure of meeting two Squired mentors, Dylan Nellis and Isha Agarwal. I'm Teo Salgado. I'm an independent consultant and advisor to Squired. Both Isha and Dylan are incredibly accomplished. And so I'm going to give a very brief introduction to them because there really is so much to say about each of them. And I know that as we go through this talk today, you're going to learn a lot more. And then, of course, as you go through their profiles in Squired, you'll also get a chance to learn more about what they do and who they are. Now, Isha is a rising sophomore at Princeton, concentrating in computer science. She completed the International Baccalaureate Diploma program at an international school in India. There, she was involved in student government, the debate team, TEDx, and was, and still is, passionate about astrophysics and computer science. Dylan Nellis is also a rising sophomore, but she's on the other side of the country. She's at Stanford, studying art practice and symbolic systems. A Southern California native, Dylan is interested in exploring the intersection between art and technology through the use of multimedia. And you can learn more about her interests by following her awesome YouTube channel. Now, one of the most frequent questions that we received in preparation for this talk was related to COVID-19. Understandably, I mean, we all have questions about what's happening and where things are going. So we're going to address that elephant in the room right at the outset. We know, and colleges know that the coronavirus pandemic upset summer plans, and actually their spring plans for many students, both in high school as well as in college. Now, in response, each of the major applications are allowing students to describe the impacts of COVID-19 on their lives. It's important to note that school counselors will also have the opportunity to detail impacts that their schools have experienced based on the pandemic. So there's going to be plenty of opportunities for you to tell about how COVID-19 impacted you. Now, Shruti submitted a question asking how she should respond to this question. And I think the most important thing is to understand the context of your academic and personal life and what changed in anything for you. So some of the things that you can talk about are things like, were there significant changes to your academic experience? Did your home situation change? And, are you taking on any new or significant responsibilities as a result of COVID? So those are some of the things that you can think about to frame your responses to that question. Now, Dylan and Isha, maybe we'll start with Isha. How were your plans impacted, and what about your extracurricular plans were impacted?
So first off, thank you so much for that introduction. And so for me, my summer plans were majorly impacted by COVID. First off, I had to, like all college students, had to leave the country and get back to India within a 2 day period. So packing up my dorm room and everything, and then online classes for the spring. But as for my plans, my internship got cancelled. Princeton then put together a list of backup internships because a lot of students were in a similar situation wherein either their summer plans got cancelled, or they hadn't gotten around to making them, or something of the sort. So then I had to reapply to internships in like May, um, to figure that out. And then in addition to that, of course, my so on campus I'm involved with the mock trial team, and I'm involved with the entrepreneurship club. And under the entrepreneurship club, I work with Ignite STEM. So we organize conferences. So of course that was made impossible.
Yeah.
Mock trial, the regionals and nationals were cancelled. And then also in addition to that, I was planning to do some volunteer work over the summer. So all of that pretty much, didn't happen anymore. I think for me, it was a lot about regrouping and figuring out what to do instead. And now that everything's online, of course, I wouldn't say opportunities are diluted as much as they are different.
Hmm.
Um, I was able to figure out a virtual internship, and even on the fronts of like, my clubs and stuff, we're looking for new avenues to work things out over Zoom.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so that's how my extracurricular plans changed as
Okay.
a result of COVID.
And I'm going to follow up on that, but first we're going to hear about Dylan's experience and how her plans were impacted by COVID.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, back in March, we all got kicked out of Stanford. They all said, go home. So we went home, and I had to do online classes. Duh, obviously, everyone did. And that was really, really hard on me, mental health wise. I faced a lot of struggles that I didn't anticipate facing. But it was a really interesting learning experience. As for summer plans, I honestly didn't have any summer plans before, so I was like trying to apply to internships and stuff, but I wasn't too like crazed about it. I was like, whatever happens, happens. It's fine. And then once everything happened, and then blah blah blah. Now we're in summer. I actually did find a internship that I'm doing remotely, so that's awesome. And I'm just like really, really focusing on my YouTube and on making all these college application resources. I'm working on a workbook right now, a like digital online course slash workbook to write your college essay. So I think those projects just kind of came up. I just
Yeah.
started making ideas and doing my own thing, and I think that's really special. And there's lots of opportunities for like tutoring and stuff. So I do that sometimes as well for like younger children. So I think, yeah, there's so many opportunities still online, which is really, really nice. So I'm not thinking of this whole situation entirely in a negative light.
Yeah.
As for extracurriculars, though, while school was still going on, the only really main extracurricular I was part of was called Ram's Head, which is a musical theater group at Stanford. And musical theater, like how can that continue unless it's online? So I was a part of a show at one point, and I was working on it behind the scenes, but that all got canceled. So then really I had no extracurriculars for my spring quarter, which I was fine with because I had so much schoolwork that I really could not take on any other commitments. Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's me.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like both of you kind of regrouped and found another way to continue doing things that were, of interest to you, right? And that's I think that's the critical takeaway here. Now, if you were a high school student today, what would you do to continue pursuing extracurricular interests? Maybe we'll start with Isha, and then we'll come back to Dylan.
I think the first thing is just like, you know, I think something that Dylan mentioned that's really important is like keeping track of your mental health. And also just like you said, regrouping. It is very scary because you can't do the things that, you've seen upperclassmen from your own school do. And you feel scared because you probably have to take, a new path. Um, but I think there are opportunities still. I think there are more opportunities for, so many summer schools got cancelled and spring plans and summer plans got impacted. I know a lot of companies are also not as intent on hiring interns, so that becomes a point of difficulty. But I think what that creates is an opportunity for greater independent work. I think
Mhm.
something that's really valuable right now is because, we're dealing with this new situation, and we're dealing with a whole new subset of issues as a result of it. And I think for high school students who are passionate about many different fields, that creates a ton of opportunities to work on solving those issues in whatever way that they can, um and working on like independent projects for that. So, making communication easier, or like making like either way, figuring out how to do social work online, things you're passionate about, and like keeping
Yeah.
track of them even right now. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I noticed when I was reading your profile on Squared that you did a lot of that kind of thing before you joined Princeton as well, right? So,
Yeah.
and I think that maybe that's one of the things that I think differentiates you from other applicants, right? Is that you had that independent streak and you were, motivated and curious right to begin with, right? Is that
I
is that
yeah,
fair, or am I like embellishing?
I hope so. um yeah, I
Yeah,
think it's just important to like regroup and like convince and like keep yourself, and be mindful of the fact that universities will be mindful of your situation, and they're
right.
gonna
True.
and to my understanding at least, they're just gonna try to see whether you made the best of what you had available to you.
Yeah,
um
exactly. And I think that that's something that I picked up in Dylan's YouTube. Like I've seen a couple of Dylan's videos, and one of the things that I think comes up over and over again is the context in which you're operating and how important that is, right? So Dylan, do you maybe want to comment on that?
Yeah, so the video that he's referring to is the one that I made about how COVID is affecting college applications. So I put my YouTube in the chat if anyone wants to check that out. If you guys aren't coming from my YouTube, because I know I sent it out to my people as well. But yeah, so one of the main things is that they view you, like you said, in the context of your situation, because they know that some people have more or less access to resources than other people coming from different kinds of communities, different places around the world. So they're very mindful of that and they want to know that, especially. So they don't want you to like hide everything that you're going through. You want to be honest, be authentic, and don't be afraid to be vulnerable to them and really express what you're going through so they can have a better understanding of your situation.
Mhm. Now, you've just completed your first year at Stanford, and where you're studying symbolic systems. How did you come to choose that area of study? And, did you reference this interest in your college essay or in the supplements?
Yeah, so I didn't know that's what I wanted to study until like halfway through the year. I mean, most people, honestly, at Stanford really don't know what they want to study until like sophomore year or something. Everyone's just kind of figuring it out, which is fine. You don't need to decide right away. As for me, when I applied to Stanford, I applied so they ask you to put three choices down. My first choice was CS plus humanities, which is like a joint program that combines computer science and the humanities. And the humanities for me would be art. However, that program does not exist anymore. And then, oh yeah, also the second thing I put on there was art practice. And then the third thing I put was science, technology, and society. So I didn't even put symbolic systems on it. And by the way, symbolic systems is just going to be my minor. And then I'm
Okay,
majoring in art practice.
right.
And I figured that out as I started taking classes and as I was, experiencing Stanford. And what I realized was that a lot of the art classes were really, really cool and interesting, and they combined technology in ways that I didn't even know existed. It wasn't all just like painting and drawing like that. I didn't want to focus on that kind of art because that's what I did in high school, but I wanted to see the new like innovative tech side of it. And then I also started taking computer science classes. And then I just do a bunch of research all the time on my computer. I'm just like surfing the web. So I looked up the programs and the majors, and I came across symbolic systems. I heard some people talking about it, and I read up on it, and it seemed like it would be perfect. It allowed me to take the computer science classes that I wanted to take, like the ones that sounded fun, sounded creative. I didn't need to take all the other ones that are, not as fun. And then symbolic systems is nice because it's like a mix of computer science and psychology and some other stuff. So that all seemed really awesome to me, and I think that I could combine my interests using
Okay.
both of those.
And when you were applying through your essays, one of the things that you did was you highlighted those two interests that you had, right? In art and computers, right? Could you maybe briefly comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I tried to make it sort of cohesive throughout my whole application. I mean, I'm a very well-rounded person, so I felt like it was very hard for me to make a like spike or whatever, because I am interested in art, I'm interested in musical theater, I'm interested in tech, and like a bunch of other things. So what I did is really try to emphasize the art and tech part of me, especially through, well, I submitted like art portfolios, and then in my art portfolios I would submit drawings, but then in some art portfolios I would also submit like graphic design or app design. I talked about my extracurriculars doing Girls Who Code, which is a coding program, which was really awesome. And I talked about my involvement in the arts because I went to an art school. So, like, visual art was part of my academic curriculum. So, that was a huge part of me, too. And then I talked about this project, which I had an idea for in my senior year, to create an app to help with seniors and elder care. And that kind of combined art and tech because it was like I was designing the app, and then I wanted to make it in the future.
Yeah, no, but that's good, right? Because you kind of showed, well, not kind of, you did. You showed through your application that this wasn't something that you came up with at the last minute, right? This was something that you had been committed to over some time. And I think that that's important to find a way to highlight that in applications, right? Now, Isha, maybe if you can comment on, what you did to learn about computer science and why you chose it, and maybe also comment on, was your interest in computer science something that you had to that you wrote about in your college essays and maybe the supplements?
Yeah. So for me, I mean, for most of my life, up until I was like 13, I wanted to do anything but computer science because so my family, my dad's involved in ComSci. He's a ComSci engineer and he runs his own firm. So I was like, I am not gonna do this. I am really not interested in this. And then I ended up taking ComSci in ninth grade and I really enjoyed it. The whole logical aspect of it and how everything just clicked really appealed to me. So I ended up sticking with it. And so the reason I took comp sci was, and the reason I enjoyed it was the logical side and everything. But the reason I stuck with it and why I knew I wanted to pursue it was because of what I could do with it. So I'm passionate about social change. When I was in school, I was heavily involved with community service and helping, um, children in the village area around our school, and helping their education, helping them out during the winters and stuff like that. And to me, the reason that I stuck with computer science was coming across this like concept of CS for social good. So there was this. So I was organizing this TEDx conference in my school. I'll talk about that later. It's a tangent. Um, but I was looking for speakers, and I came by this student at Stanford actually called Manu Chopra, who started this CS for Social Good club. I think at Stanford, and they'd worked with Planned Parenthood, and they'd worked with Black Lives Matter, and they'd worked with this organization in India called the Akshay Patra Foundation. So to me, just the fact that I could use something I was passionate about to help like communities and people that I care about was really wonderful. Plus, I somewhere think that comp sci is going to be like the reading and writing of the future. it's going to be that essential a skill. So, that is obviously a factor. Plus, throughout middle school and high school, and even now, I'm also really interested in literature and I'm very interested in physics. Computer science meant I didn't have to give up those things. I could, keep in touch with those things through computer science. So that's why I ended up choosing computer science. And yeah, I mean, so many universities had a why you want to pursue a particular major kind of supplement. And I think the important part of that for me was, so these two narratives that I spoke about, why I ended up choosing computer science, are narratives that I spoke about even in my essays. So I tried to link the activities that I did throughout high school to these narratives, to these larger narratives of, why I want to be involved in this field. So I was involved. I did this internship for to help with vertigo treatment, and I did this research project for like trig proofs. And I spoke about how those gave me a taste of CS for social change. So I think at least in my experience, the most important part of a why major essay isn't just like listing your experiences and your activities, but like really, really talking about a larger purpose of why you are interested in what you are interested in. I think that's the that really helps.
Yeah, yeah, that's just wonderful, wonderful, really great insight. Now, I know that part of the reason I think that students have joined us today, and maybe parents and potentially counselors as well, is maybe because they want to hear a little bit about what it's like to study at your respective universities, right? So maybe if you can tell us a little bit about before March and the whole coronavirus thing, what was your most memorable college experience? Maybe we'll start with Dylan and then we'll come back to Isha.
Cool. My most memorable experience was definitely performing in what's called Gaieties. It is a musical that is put on every year at Stanford. It's a comedic musical, usually about the rivalry between Stanford and Cal, and usually they have a freshman cast as like the main characters. And I was so fortunate to be one of those freshman heroes. So I was actually like one of the main characters in this main stage musical, and it was so, so fun. And I made amazing friends through that experience, got to know a lot of people involved in theater because I didn't know too much about theater at Stanford before. Stanford seems like, oh, it's a STEM school, but
Yeah.
they have tons of people interested in the arts and people who are interested in both. So that was really cool. I loved that. It made me especially come out of my shell a bit more. I mean, I'm already pretty like outgoing and talkative and stuff, but it made me even more extroverted being a part of that show. It's a very raunchy show, also. So it's very fun, very, very fun. And so I was in rehearsal all the time, but that made things a little bit hard, especially in my fall quarter, because I was adjusting to Stanford and still trying to like figure out my life and live without my parents and, go about school and adjust to the environment. But I had rehearsal every single night from like 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. And so I didn't have time for homework. And then I was stressed. And then I did homework in the middle of the day in like little increments of time whenever I wasn't in class or wasn't doing something else. So it got very stressful, but I was also having so much fun. And what was interesting though is winter quarter after the show was over, I was fine. Like it wasn't stressful anymore. I was taking a larger course load, yet I was less stressed, which was really interesting. And I was really feeling like I was just going with the flow. So it wasn't stressful. I was just busy. Yeah.
Right, right. Would you, I want to follow up on that. Like, is stress a part of that experience at Stanford, or will you say that people kind of, it's not so much? I mean, that's the kind of thing you hear, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, people talk about duck syndrome. If anyone knows what duck syndrome, it's like the duck is floating above water. but underneath their legs are kicking like really hard. So they're just like trying so hard to stay afloat. But on the surface, they're like, I'm fine. Everything's fine. And apparently, people say that's how a lot of people at Stanford act because everyone's all like friendly and happy and like fine. But deep down, they're really like working so hard, which for me, I don't necessarily feel like I'm like that. I feel like, if anything, I am I'm like very obvious about the duck kicking on the bottom part. Like I don't try to mask anything. I'm like, guys, I'm stressed or like I have so much work to do, you know? I'm
Yeah.
very open about my emotions and what I'm going through.
Yeah. Okay. It's, that's it's I like that example that you gave. And Isha, is it the same at Princeton?
I mean, I think at Princeton, I mean, yeah, there is stress, I think, because everyone's constantly trying to keep up with like their extracurriculars and like with each other and with, academics. So on Princeton campus, there's this very you meet someone, you run into someone on, while you're going to a class or at the library. And so Princeton's version of let's catch up when you see an old friend is let's grab a meal. It never actually happens because everyone's so busy.
Yeah, literally same thing.
Okay. All right. But you had some really good experiences though, right? That first year. Can you maybe tell us about the most memorable one?
Yeah, for sure. So I think like something that really stuck out to me, I really love that, I really love universities that are big on traditions. That used to be one of my favorite things to research about them as well when we were applying. So Princeton's traditions have been some of like my favorite parts of the last year.
Mhm.
So there is this one in particular, which is pickups. So when we have after like the weekend after the the activities fair in fall and in spring, but it's bigger in fall. Their way of telling you whether or not you made it through selections isn't via email. Instead, half the group shows up to your door. So a part of the application is that they ask for your building and your room number, because half the group shows up to your door, bangs on your door, makes a whole fuss of it. And, then you go out with them, and that's how you find out whether or not you got in. Um,
Yeah, we
it's
have the same thing.
oh,
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. And you better not be sleeping.
You better not be sleeping. They
And
might
most
come
of
at
the time
1
you
a.m.
are.
I had a friend whose improv club came at 3 a.m. He opened the door and they just blasted shaving foam in his face.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a whole thing. But it was really fun for me. And it was just a really great vibe. It was a really good energy. So that's one of my favorite memories.
That's excellent. That sounds like a lot of fun. Well, maybe not if you're sleeping.
It was
But
terrifying. I was
yeah.
woken up and I was so scared.
And all your roommates are just staring daggers at you because,
Yeah, exactly. Now, so, something that I think students that are with us today probably want to know a little bit about is, what kind of activities were you involved in outside of school when you were at high school, right? And again, this is the kind of information that they can get through the Squired profiles. But, can you maybe tell us a little bit about that and how that maybe prepared you for university? And also, one more thing, did you continue doing any of these while you're at Stanford and at Princeton? So maybe we'll start with Dylan and then we'll go back to Isha.
Yeah. So in high school, I was very much a part of like visual art and doing that because that was part of my curriculum at school. So I was always making art and doing that stuff. I also was very involved in like theater and musical theater. So I was in rehearsal all the time. Oh, what do you know? Just like I am at Stanford, very similar. So I was always in rehearsal after school, late at night. And so that's very similar. It's very similar because also the fact that I'm studying visual art, but then I do musical theater as an extracurricular. That is the same thing for both high school and college so far.
Mhm.
And then I was a part of theater clubs in high school, and I did some like design work for them because I was historian, so I did a lot of like social media stuff, designing posters, designing whatever, like social media posts and stuff. That I I sort of did that in college. I mean,
Yeah.
I was a marketing intern at the theater club, so I guess kind of the same thing,
Yeah.
but not quite.
Yeah.
And then as for like the computer science and technology side, I really was not that involved with computer science or technology in high school. Like I did Girls Who Code, but that was kind of the extent of it. So I didn't really feel like I was a CS person. I knew it
Mhm.
was something that I wanted to try and learn about, but I didn't know too much about it. And so I never really considered myself like a coder or anything. I mean, I still
Mhm.
don't exactly just because I've only taken two CS classes. I feel like I need to know a lot more to feel confident in calling myself that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I did some other stuff too. I volunteered, worked with kids, and started a math club. I did not start a math club at Stanford. I'm not taking math at Stanford.
I think it's been there for a while, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. And but when you were listing, these are the types of activities that you put in the activities listing in the applications, right? The all of these activities that you've talked about right now were things that you would have featured in
Oh,
those in the
absolutely.
applications. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Good. Isha, maybe if you can just kind of add to that.
Uh-huh. Yeah, for sure. Um, so for me, I feel like I'd split high school up into grade 9 to 11, and then grade 12, because grade 9 to 11, I was very involved in you know, I was very involved with the debate. I'm really into public speaking. I really enjoy public speaking. So I was very involved with the debate team. I was very involved with Model UN. I was student government was something that was a really big part of my high school experience. Grade 12, on the other hand, I focus much more on like independent projects. So grade 12 over the summer, the new the Vertigo internship that I was talking about, that was a big part of my summer. So I worked with this startup in my city in Jaipur. I worked with the startup, this super specialty Vertigo clinic, to like design this app for like cognitive training, which was supposed to help Vertigo and like older adults. Then I partook in this summer program at Yale, which is the Yale summer program in astrophysics. The name is pretty
Yeah.
self-explanatory, but it was a really fun research project in astrophysics. Apart from that, I did some research in comp sci with this professor from Harvey Mudd, which was also a big part of my extracurriculars that year. And then most of the rest of my senior year, I mean, after September, it was pretty much college applications and preparing for IB exams.
Okay.
But up until then, I was also very involved with organizing this TEDx conference at my school.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, so for me my activities were this balance of like I was involved with a lot of very school heavy, group heavy activities through ninth grades 9 through 11, and then 12th grade was some more independent projects.
Right.
And yeah, I did some volunteering. I ran this social initiative to help, like I was talking about earlier, to help like children in the village around our school. And just like we did a bunch of stuff. We didn't really have a cohesive mission. We collected funds for the Kerala floods and stuff like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, but you know
Yeah.
what I'm hearing from both of you is that the kind of things that you were getting involved in, like really were things that you cared about. These were things that were, very important to you, right? It wasn't you were just signing up for things because, what you wanted to add them to the activities list on an application or on a resume. I mean, these were things that were just, near and dear to your heart, right? Um, you know, is that fair to say?
Absolutely.
For sure.
I think something that I learned throughout high school is, well, first going into ninth grade, I was like, oh my gosh, high schoolers have to volunteer. Like that's a thing they have to do. So I just need to volunteer in a bunch of places, right? But the thing is, what I came to realize is it's less about, oh, spend an hour doing the AIDS walk, spend an hour making lunches for, stuff like that. It's less about little tiny acts of service. It's more about committing yourself to something that you truly care about and you're going to dedicate your time to. So they don't, I mean, from what I've heard and know, that they care less about a ton of things that you didn't really truly care about, but you just did it to make it look good on your application versus I was truly passionate about this. I wanted to do this, and that's why I did it.
Yeah.
Plus,
Now,
it makes it look good. Yeah.
but Dylan, actually, Stanford allows you to read the comments on your app, right? On your application.
Oh, yeah. The
Yeah.
admissions file?
So can you maybe talk about that? And then Isha, if Princeton does the same, maybe you can talk a little bit about that as well. Okay.
Yeah, so I read
And
my
what did you learn about what you read, about the
yeah,
comments on that? Yeah.
it was very interesting. So I'm gonna say what I remember because I did this in maybe like January, if I remember. I might be wrong. So they allow you to go and schedule an appointment to go look at your admissions file and see exactly what they said about you when they reviewed your application. So I did that, and it was very interesting. They really liked my extracurriculars, and I think, yeah, they definitely saw the passion. They definitely talked about my art. What was really interesting is that almost every reader, like I think they write notes, and so one thing they kept noting was Girls Who Code, which was the summer program that I did to learn about coding, and I didn't know that that was so important, but I guess it was because they kept writing it down, which was very interesting. And another thing that I love to talk about this is the interview and what the interviewer said about me because when I did my interview, I talked about an experience that I didn't talk about at all in my application. I talked about this theater competition that I did that was very challenging for me. It pushed me to kind of take control because I was like managing a group of students to put on this musical. We were trying to make an 8-minute musical and then perform it and do this whole competition. And it was a lot of work, like a lot of work. And so I talked about that with my interviewer. I talked about the struggles of that. And it was very interesting to see that he wrote a lot about that in his note or like kind of summarized what I told him, which was so interesting because I didn't talk about that at all in my application. It wasn't even an extracurricular that I listed. Yet to know that that experience that showed so much of my character actually meant a lot, which was really nice to know.
Yeah, no, that is really interesting, and I'm seeing some questions coming in, and this maybe Isha will address as she responds to that original question. But some of the other questions that we're getting is any advice on how to be accepted to Princeton? I don't think that there's any specific advice because it's contextual and it depends on the individual. But maybe if you can talk about what you learned about, if they allow you to read the comments on your app. No, they don't. But have you gotten a sense of, from your other, like the other students, maybe what you think made them a good candidate for Princeton?
Yeah, for sure. So first off, Dylan, that sounds really cool. I don't know if Princeton has something like that. I haven't heard of it at least. But yeah. So to my I'm also just gonna say to one of the questions, you do get everyone gets a mandatory interview at Princeton. So I think Princeton and Stanford are two of the universities that give everyone an interview. Someone asked that in the group chat. Um, yeah, so to my understanding at least, so Princeton's unofficial motto is in service of humanity and in service of the nation. Um, and I think, at least I feel like maybe I have a small sample size, but I feel like that's really well reflected in every single student I've come across. Every student I've chatted with, or every student I'm really close to, but also every student I've even seen for like 3 minutes. One thing that I feel like really, really resonates is a passion for like a passion to just help people in it could be in a really small way. It could be, explaining a concept to someone in your class, but it could be like being really involved with community service. So I've just found that everyone at Princeton is very not just open to collaboration, but really open to taking as much time as it takes out of their schedule, no matter how busy it is, to help you. And I think that's something that's really valuable. We even have, we have like a separate center for civic engagement, the Pace Center, which, I mean, one of its primary focuses is just like helping students find service opportunities. So I don't know. And apart from that, I think the other, so this doesn't necessarily mean, talk about community service on your Princeton applications. I just mean to say that if you have a passion, that most people at Princeton seem to have a passion to just like help other people.
Yeah.
And apart from that, I think the other common factor to me is just what Dylan said earlier. People who are just like really passionate about whatever they're doing. It could be math, it could be chess, it could be the piano, it could be whatever, but they're just really involved and they're really enjoying it and they really care about it. And when they talk about their activities and what they were involved in high school, you see that. So I think that really circles back around to what Dylan was saying again, uh, about, not just getting involved with activities because you think they look good, but just like doing stuff, like doing meaningful stuff that you're passionate about.
Yeah, and I
Um,
mean, yeah, and I mean that's one of the things that people need to understand is that admissions officers, many of them have been doing this for years, right? So they're very good at detecting when somebody is really, invested in whatever project they're involved in, right? They can really pick that up from an application. And I really like what you mentioned there, Isha, and it's something that I will always ask students to do in my work, is to take a look at the mission statement of the institution that you're applying to. Because if if your mission, your personal mission, your core values align with the universities, then it's a very good match, at least on those terms, right? Now, talking about service, because I really see this as a service, Dylan. What inspired you to start a YouTube channel to help students with college applications?
Yeah, so when I was going about the process, I felt very lost. There was not a lot of support at my school, and I couldn't afford any private counseling. So I really just had to do it on my own and do a bunch of research on my own, which was awesome. And I'm so glad I did that because the internet is filled with so much information. And I didn't know this before, but it truly, truly is. You can learn so much. So I learned a bunch of stuff through articles, through books, through videos, a lot of YouTube videos. And then I learned so much information and I was like, oh my gosh, why why does no one else know this information? Why do all the people at my high school not know this information? They need this information. So it was really nice that I actually was a peer counselor. Like I had that as one of my classes. So as I was going about the college application myself, I was also helping other students at the same time. And I could teach them some of the stuff that I was learning. But after I, got into my schools, I was like, wow, okay, the things that I did worked. It seems that all this information was true. Like it worked for me. So I want this to be available to everybody else. So I started a YouTube channel, which is funny because I only wanted to make like 3 videos and then be like, okay, I'm not doing that anymore. I just wanted to make 3 videos, get it out, get all my information out, and then just leave. Yet that didn't happen because I started sharing the videos and then I got a pretty good response and people were saying how useful it was. And then I was like, wait a minute, there's so much information I can still share. So I kept going and going, and it's been a year now, a little bit over a year, and I just keep putting out content. But at the same time, I know a lot of criticism behind YouTubers is that like, oh, they don't really know anything. They just know how they got in, blah, blah, which absolutely, to some extent, yes, they don't know as much because they know what they did personally. But at the same time, I'm not just stopping here. Like, this is what I did, end of story. I'm continuing to research. Especially this summer, I've been doing so much research on college essays and how exactly to write the college essays. And that is also important. And I'm learning so much that I didn't even know when I was applying to school that now I feel like, yeah, like I know just so much more than I ever did before, which is
Yeah.
really cool. And I want that information to get across.
Yeah.
So,
And now people can access all of that information that you have through Squired as well, right?
absolutely. And I'm just
Yeah.
going to share my web link as well because I have all of my like free resources and services here. So one sec, let me
Okay,
just.
perfect. And I see that there was a question from Ruba, because you're from California, and she submitted a question asking for advice on how to handle the UC personal insight questions. So, they tend to be a little bit different, right, from the college essays for a Common App. Can you maybe comment a little bit on that, Dylan?
Yeah, so they ask you to write 4 essays rather than one, except they're a little bit shorter than the Common App. They're all 350 words or less. And what's different, especially about the UCs versus the Common App, is for the UC schools, they want you to be a lot more straightforward. And it's more just like what you did, what you learned, like the values that you gained, how you applied what you learned to other things in your life and to the major that you want to study or stuff like that. So it's very like straight to the point. This is what I did. It's also a great idea to expand on an extracurricular that you did for the UC prompts. Like pick an extracurricular that fits one of the prompts, and then you can talk about your experience from that and what you gained from that. Whereas the Common Application, you don't exactly want to do that as much. This especially do not go listing all your activity section in your essay because they already see that in their activity section. For the Common App, it's a lot more personal and deep and vulnerable and authentic. And I think so. Yeah, that's something to keep in mind. But at the same time, you can swap the essays. I mean, I turned my Common App essay into one of my UCPIQs. I turned some of the UCPIQs into a supplement that I sent to Stanford. So you kind of just mold it to fit the question.
Good. Now, Isha's experience would have been a little bit different because Isha, you're an international student from India. Can you tell us about your experience going through the college search and application process, and maybe what insights can you share about the process that you kind of learned along the way?
Yeah, for sure. So as an international student, I felt it best to like kind of spread out my risk. So I applied to 17 schools in the US and 5 in the UK. I don't actually recommend to applying to these many places. It's just that I went to a college prep high school, and most people did that. So but I applied to both the US and the UK, and I think one of the biggest things that you learn is that um you know the UK process is very different as compared to that in the US. Universities in the US kind of want to understand, to my understanding at least, universities in the US don't just want to see your academic prowess and your co-curricular prowess. They want to understand you as a person, which I think really goes back to what Dylan mentioned about getting really personal with your Common App. um and they want to kind of see what they want to understand, what kind of person you are, as they mentioned, whether how their mission statement might fit your personality, and more than anything else, how you'd fit into their community, what role you'd play as a scholar but also as a person. So I feel like for that purpose, one of the greatest things that I learned. So the UK process is very different. There is a very straightforward 4,000 character. I mean, that was, at least, maybe it's still the same.
Yeah.
There's a very straightforward 4,000 character personal statement that you write, which is a combination of, what you want to pursue, why you want to pursue what you want to pursue, your extracurricular activities. There's no separate activities list. why you want to go to the UK. So it's just like this one all-encompassing essay. So there's no real need or space for, you know, um, you as a person beyond, your activities and your academics. Whereas when it comes to your essays for US college and universities, I think the most important thing is kind of your college application process will also, at least it did for me, will also become this huge period of like reflection and self-awareness, because you need to understand yourself and what makes you you and what makes you tick, and then convey that to your admissions officers.
Yeah.
Kind of construct this whole thing of not just what you've done, but who you are.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess that probably part of the reason for that is that, British universities tend to be larger, right? Whereas American institutions, at least the ones that you've all, like, we're talking about today, are smaller. And the impact that one individual can have on an institution is really significant, right? So that's probably why there's so much attention to the person in that, and you kind of need to convey that through the essay. One of the things that I see a couple of, this is a kind of a theme in the chat, it's talking about how you recommend approaching the writing of the application. Any methodologies that you used to writing essays. Dylan, maybe we'll start with you. Maybe you can comment on how I think you had like some really good lessons on how to approach writing the statements, and how to like weave your character and your passion into the writing. And maybe then we'll turn to Isha.
Yes, absolutely. So I do have videos on this. You can find my channel. It's literally just my name on YouTube. But some things that I can mention, like very specific, like writing stuff. For example, try not to say the word you. Don't use second person. You really want to talk about yourself always. Not always, always, but always point it back to yourself. Talk about how you were feeling. Words like I, me, my, very personal words to you. And then in terms of being creative with your writing, everyone says show, don't tell. I don't know if you guys have heard that before, but it's something that's absolutely a great tactic to do, which is where you don't just state what happened, you show what happened. Show us, for example, instead of saying like, I left my house to go to the grocery market, I don't know, like I grabbed my keys that were hanging somewhere, and then I opened the door and I looked back to check if da da da, and then you take us through the experience and then talk about how you felt throughout it too. That was probably a bad example, but if you look at my essays, I have examples of that where I did that, because I did a lot of like show don't tell kind of things in my own essays that I submitted to all of my schools. And then another thing that you can do is wrap it in a metaphor. You can wrap your whole essay in a metaphor if you want. I've seen a great example essay by my friend who wrapped her whole essay about an airplane landing. She was in an airplane, and as you're looking at the world from afar, you can't see as much, right? But as you get closer, you start to see the details and the buildings and stuff. And she tied that into identities and backgrounds, and how when you look at a person, you only see like what they look like on the outside, but you don't truly know who they are and their backgrounds and stuff. And so she talked about like her mixed backgrounds, and I thought that was a really awesome metaphor that she used. So those are some tactics. But yeah, I think it'll also be, I'm coming out with a workbook. I know I kind of already said this, but I kind of like hold your hand and walk you through the whole writing process. So if you want to be updated about its launch, you can check out the link that I said earlier, or follow me on the YouTube or whatever, and I will release it everywhere.
Yeah, cool. And of course, they can also ask you through Squired, right?
Yeah.
So, which would be great. Yeah, cool. Isha, maybe if you can comment about your experience.
Yeah, for sure. So I kind of found that, there are a couple of different processes that you can I mean, there's obviously it's personal for everyone, but something that was very helpful to me and something that, I always recommend to anyone who asks about how to approach the Common App essay at least is one thing that really helps is trying to construct a timeline of, your high school years. And when I say timeline, I mean major events personally, academically, co-curricular wise. And then you start to see patterns. You start to see, how particular events affected others and how you changed throughout those. And that can help you find a topic. But what helped me find my topic was, talking to people that I was close to. So I feel like sometimes other people can understand you better. I mean, you see yourself better through the eyes of another person. And so for me, talking to my family, talking to close friends, and trying to talk to them about what they've seen that's changed in my behavior, and then trying to kind of, trace that back to an event that may have resulted in that. So I think something that's really important is just to, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
I was just saying. So yeah, I think something that really helps is just to talk to other people, try to see patterns and major transformations you may have gone through. Because sometimes, you might have changed in like very major ways over the last 3 4 years without even realizing them. And like
Yep.
those things and how, the things which have shaped the biggest parts of your personality today make for really good common app essays sometimes, but
Great.
it differs for everyone.
Absolutely. But I think that the tip to talk to people, I think is very valuable. But I think one of the things that you don't want to do is get too many cooks into the kitchen, right? Because then you kind of lose your voice, you lose yourself in that discussion. So you have to be very selective as to who you let in and how many people you share that with. But this is good. Listen, I'm really mindful that we've got only 3 minutes left before we wrap things up, and there's a lot of questions here. But there are a couple of things that I want to say. One is that for those of you that are interested in learning more about Isha and Dylan and getting to know more about how the tool Squired can help you with this application process, I know that there's a promotion that if you go to Squired and you click on mentors and then you choose on a mentor that you're interested in, and if you enter the code webinar, there's a $15 off special for those of you who joined the webinar today. So that's a really neat value that you're getting here. And then I guess I do want to wrap up by giving maybe Isha and Dylan just a minute to maybe talk a little bit about, what's the one thing that you maybe want to say to those that are here today? What's the one piece of advice that you want to give them as they go through the application process?
Dylan, do you want to go first?
Okay. Sure. One thing that I always say and I always stress is that you want to know how exactly you are going to approach your college applications, and go about them and strategize, strategize in a smart way before you start. Before you start writing, you need to do the research. You need to learn how to write the essays, because my system is always focused on saving you time in the long run. It may seem like I'm having you do a bunch of pre-production work, get organized, make a schedule, do this research, write these things down, instead of like, oh, jumpstart head, like just start writing the essays. But that saves you so much time in the long run, because further down the line, if you don't do all that pre-production work, you're going to realize that your structure is off in your essays, or you're not really showcasing the qualities that you do want to showcase, and it doesn't really encapsulate who you are as a person. So I recommend doing all that research before you get started, and do all that stuff early, because everyone says start early, but don't start early just jumping into the essays without knowing how you're going to do it. Do that research first so you have a really good understanding. Also read accepted essays to see how other people did it.
Yeah, and you can see those on Squired, right? Yeah, perfect. Okay, Isha.
Yeah, I'm just gonna be really quick, and because I also want to be mindful of everyone's time. But
Yeah.
I'm just gonna bounce off of what Dylan said and say that that's really true. And like, also keep in mind the same strategy when you're researching universities. You know, do your research when it around professors, around clubs and activities, around traditions, because not only are you going to get more of an idea for when you actually write your why college essays, but you're also going to kind of start to get a feel about what kind of university you want to be at. It's going to help you fine tune your college list, and it's going to help you really understand what kind of culture you're looking for in a university as well, which is also really important.
Okay, perfect. Wonderful insight, Dylan and Isha. Thank you so very much for joining this conversation today. To me, as an independent educational consultant, I know that I learned a lot about both your schools, but also about an approach that students can take to writing their telling their story to colleges, not just the essays, but in all the different elements of the application. So thank you to everybody who's joined us today. And again, if just a reminder that if you want to take advantage of Squired and the benefits of looking into the profiles of students who have been admitted to highly selective schools, you can just click on the link there and enter the code webinar to receive a $15 voucher. Well, thank you all. And again, have a good evening. Keep well, keep washing your hands, and keep safe.
Thank you
Thank you
so
so
much
much.
for having us.
All right.
Thank you for having us. Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.